care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solutions Info Show. I'm so glad that you could join us today. The topic today is something we can really sink our teeth into. That's because it's about senior dental care. Now, you might not think that senior dental care is an exciting issue, but it's a very, very important issue. And we're going to talk about those issues. We're going to talk about the problems associated with improper senior dental care. We're going to talk about how to solve some of those problems. And we're also going to talk about how this COVID-19 impacts senior dental care. So it's really something that we're going to get into, and we have the perfect people to talk about this today. I'm very excited to have my two guests joining me online, and one of them was actually here about a year ago, and she's back with us, and her name is Debbie Tarakovsky, and Debbie is the president of the Swallowing Diagnostics Incorporated, and she has been in this capacity for at least 20 years, lots of experience. Debbie also is an adjunct professor, instructor, as I might say, at Nova Southeastern University in clinical, and she's also very involved with helping people with swallowing problems, and therefore swallowing diagnostics. And when she was on last time, we had a lot to talk about with actually identifying problems with people that have dementia and have other issues, swallowing, and how it affects, everything that goes on and some of the ways that can be treated. So that was very exciting. So Debbie, welcome back to Caregiver Solutions Info Show.
Hi, Marcia. Thank you so much for having me on. So good to see you again.
It's great to see you. And now joining us is Lacey Russell. Now, Lacey is she's a dental hygienist. She's 15 years as a licensed and registered dental hygienist. Her company that she co-founded is called Apple Mobile Dental Management. And thank you so much, Lacey, for joining us today. I'm happy to meet you through Debbie, and welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having us, Marcia. Debbie had a lot of great things to say about the network and that you were really still keeping everyone connected through COVID. So it's great to be here and to have all of us still be able to come together.
Well, thank you. It's important to continue on with the educational platform that we do on Caregiver Solutions because, we talk about caregiving, we talk about dementia, Alzheimer's. None of that goes away just because we have a big pandemic virus out there. We still, like you said, have to be connected, still have to reach out, still have to learn. We still have problems that have to be solved. So today is going to be a special day because we're talking about something new and different. So Debbie, I want to ask you, you invited me to invite Lacey because somehow you two are connected with what you do. And I know the swallowing is what you do, the dental is what Lacey does, but how are you two integrated? How do you know each other, and why have you teamed up?
Well, that's a great question because not everybody always sees the connection. But from the time Lacey and I met, we immediately saw a connection. You know, when in my company we go into assisted living facilities like Arden Courts, and we do the procedure called the modified barium swallow study, which is an x-ray of the swallow, but we always start with the oral cavity and what's happening in the oral cavity. So we're constantly assessing patients for oral care, for, what do their teeth look like, what do the mucosa in the mouth look like, and what type of condition is the mouth in. So when I met Lacey and she had the mobile company providing the oral care and dental services to patients, we immediately started talking about the difference between when patients are at home, when people are at home, and how we care for our own mouths. And then there's this transition that happens. Someone possibly ends up being admitted to a hospital and then going into a post-acute care environment, whether that's skilled nursing, assisted living, eventually back home or not. And the focus of their care somehow drifts away from the oral cavity. And the oral cavity is the gateway to the body. And when we don't take care of that first, that just leads to so many other problems. And so Lacey and I immediately were talking about the neglect, basically, that was going on by patients themselves, family members, their caregivers in facilities, not purposefully neglect, but just that the focus ends up being on, did the patient get their medications? How are they walking? Are they able to care for themselves? And the oral cavity and the care of the oral cavity becomes lower and lower and lower on the list. It went from maybe mom or dad being at home and brushing their teeth a few times a day and going to the dentist a few times a year and, getting expensive procedures done on their mouth to really take care of their mouth very well, to not really paying attention to that. And that kind of takes me to the fact that, what do we think about when we think about the oral cavity? And that is some of the things I just mentioned, like, okay, do you brush your teeth every day? And how pretty do your teeth look when you smile? Do you want to get teeth whitening? Do you want to get teeth straightening? The big things that we talk about today, right? But there's so much more to oral care and taking care of your mouth than just that. And that's typically what the general population thinks of when they think of the mouth. But when we're not paying attention to the mouth, when we're not paying attention to the teeth, the gums, the mucosa, it leads to so many other problems. And for me as a speech pathologist and running swallowing diagnostics, we get called in when the patient starts decompensating. So it's almost an after the fact thing. They start to have problems chewing, let's say, because their dentures aren't fitting well, or they lost their dentures, or there's some mouth pain. And Lacey, I think we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. So we get called in because of weight loss issues, because of the patient's not eating the right foods anymore. And that leads to so many other problems with metabolism in the body, again, with being able to maintain weight, with disease in the mouth and how that transmits to the rest of the body. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I definitely see a correlation here because you're both, working with your clients and have to do with, you mentioned the oral cavity. Lacey, your company, Apple Mobile Dental, as Debbie mentioned, you actually go into long-term care facilities, assisted living facilities, and it's mobile. You work a lot with the geriatric population, so you see this all the time, and you have knowledge of it, and it makes sense that the two of you work together, because what one doesn't see, the other one does, and how it interconnects. So I think that's great. So congratulations on your new founded partnership. So Lacey, you mentioned that there is, of course, we all know we're in the COVID-19 pandemic, but you said in your note to me that there's really another unspoken pandemic. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. And to kind of piggyback off what Debbie had said, I hear this story so often with families that their loved one went into a post-acute care community, and mom all of her life had taken good care and pride in her teeth, had dental restorative work done, had cleanings done, things like that. And now her teeth and mouth all of a sudden have a lot of issues. And so what I say the unspoken pandemic is that whenever, unfortunately, we're dealing with numerous obstacles in the down spiral of a senior's health, whether you're a healthcare provider that's got the laundry list of X, Y, and Z to take care of with this patient, or a family member that may be taking care of kids, worried about mom, and is juggling all of these different things that they're not used to that world. And so unfortunately, dental just ends up at the bottom of the totem pole for both people, for the healthcare providers, for the families, for the resident themselves. Maybe they've lost dexterity. Maybe they, have some memory care issues. So they can't, they're not even cognizant enough to be thinking about the self-care and things like that, or depression with seniors. And so there's so many factors, the lack of access to care, the compounding effects of all of the multi-medications that they're on, drying out their mouth, or if a CNA isn't helping them to brush their teeth and they physically can't. So that's why I say the unspoken pandemic, because for years, every facility that I've gone into, there's so much space for education and kind of taking people from that mindset, like Debbie said, of when they think about teeth, okay, we're not worried about mom having a pretty smile right now, or, we're not thinking about bridge work or this or that. Kind of taking them away from that approach and realizing the medical conditions and the link between dental and medical. And the mouth is not cut off from the rest of the body, and it is actually the precursor to great health. And if you don't have good dental health, there's no way that you can have good systemic health. And then you're talking about a population that has all of these comorbidities and some issues with their immune systems and things like that. So we really need them to be as healthy as possible. And it's just really unfortunate that we can't, get that higher up on the totem pole. So that's why I'm very appreciative for times like this.
Well, it's a good topic, because not only is it an unspoken pandemic, but because it's in the mouth, it's sort of like an unseen pandemic, because we don't go around, with our mouths open and having people check them all the time, unless they are going to the dentist or something like that. So I think it's probably, like you said, it is a pandemic in its own right, because it's probably a bigger problem than we suspect. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Debbie and Lacey are going to share with us why dental health is so important. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help, because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Today we're talking about senior dental care, dental health, why it's important, what some things can happen to us if we don't continue with good dental care. And as a lot of caregivers out there know, when your person that you're taking care of has a cognitive issue, maybe even a physical issue where it's harder for them to brush their teeth or harder for you to get them to brush their teeth, that's going to cause some problems. So, Lacey, you were talking about why it's important to have good dental care. You're a registered licensed dental hygienist, you see it all the time. We mentioned briefly a little bit about dentures. What are some of the problems that dentures can cause when we don't include that as part of our daily care?
Right. Denture care for this demographic of folks is incredibly important. And one statistic I think that everyone should know is that a patient who sleeps with their denture in their mouth is 2.5 times more likely to have aspiration pneumonia. Aspiration pneumonia is the leading cause of death in skilled nursing facilities. So to me, it's just a huge point that I want to get across, is that by giving someone this preventative care measure, you can literally avoid potential mortality with this person and assisting them and helping to keep that clean. Also, with dentures, it's not a one-time fix. So it's something that there has to actually be a lot of maintenance in. So as you get older, the longer you've had dentures, your bone actually starts to reabsorb. So the dentures require maintenance and realignments and things like that to kind of get them to suction back on so they fit well. If a denture isn't examined, or the patient's mouth isn't examined, and maybe the patient's non-communicative, they could have sores, they could have trauma-induced cancer, infections in those areas, and not to mention, I mean, and I don't know if you mind me showing, I have a photo, and I don't want to say that it's graphic, because it's something that I see every day in post-acute care facilities. And so patients are having these dentures and partials in their mouth for sometimes months. And, when you take them out, I'll take a photo and then I'll do an in-service at the facility. And it's kind of, and the nurses we end up having a laugh about it. But when I show the photo, they say, "Oh, that's gross." And and I said, "Well, hold on. We can't say it's gross. This is what's in the patient's mouths because we're not cleaning." So if you think it's gross, how, that patient or whoever you're taking care of, that's what's going on in their mouth. And this is just, we all know what plaque looks like. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but that's just a daily occurrence. And what happens is these patients have these big pieces of plaque in their mouth, which is essentially bacterial and viral loads. So as those big clusters of plaque get inhaled by a senior, the bacteria set up camp in the lungs, and you've got a prime candidate for aspiration pneumonia, which also comes back around to patients with swallowing disorders or issues swallowing. And, I would see these issues with these patients and I'd be worried and saying, okay, well, this person needs some assistance. There's something going on here. I'm worried about aspiration pneumonia and any kind of care that they get. And that was, again, kind of the needle through the thread with Debbie and I.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention, we get called in to do a swallowing study because clinicians and physicians are concerned about patients swallowing and getting food or liquid into their lungs. And they don't always consider, well, what's going on in their mouth? Forget about what they're eating and drinking. What's happening in their mouth without food or liquid and getting carried down into their lungs through their saliva. So again, it's another point where we just connected we constantly are talking about, that oral care and how important the oral care is. We do we get what's called micro aspirations. We all do this. And it's okay if your body's pretty healthy to have these little micro aspirations. While we sleep, we aspirate. And let me clarify, aspiration means something entering the lungs, basically from the oral cavity or from somewhere along the tract. If it becomes infectious in the system, we develop aspiration pneumonia. So we do our best to educate others in the medical environment that you have to start with the oral care. If the mouth isn't clean, if the patient's unable to eat and drink efficiently, then the body can't do its job. So if we're not eating well, if we're not hydrating well, if we're taking lots of medications that cause xerostomia, the saliva isn't there to do its job to keep washing and cleaning the oral cavity. So that bacteria and viral load builds, and then when the patient actually does swallow, you're actually getting that bacteria into the lungs, which is much worse than getting water or your saliva in the lungs, or sometimes even a little bit of liquid in the lungs. Bacteria with a high viral load is likely to cause pneumonia a lot faster than clean saliva or a little bit of liquid here and there entering the lungs through a microaspiration. So we do try to educate as well that to reduce aspiration pneumonia, you have to keep the mouth clean.
Well, it's interesting what you said about a patient or a person at home maybe losing weight, and you can't figure out why they don't want to eat or why they're not eating much, and I don't think a lot of people would stop to think about, is it because they're in pain? Is it because they have something wrong in their mouth? Is it because they have ill-fitting dentures and it hurts? And I don't think people really dig deep enough to maybe look at that as a reason, because they're thinking, well, she's getting older. Well, the Alzheimer's is getting worse, and, she's just not interested in food. Well, she lost her taste buds, because we know that goes, out the door with Alzheimer's a lot of times, and they only want to eat the sweet stuff. They love the candy and the cookies and the cake, which is bad for us. But that being said, I think that's a really, really good, important point that you guys bring up, is about looking into the mouth for other reasons why, we're showing other signs and symptoms on the outside. So that being said, I think, Lacey, you mentioned first, and then Debbie, you brought it up too, but now I want to focus on it. You both mentioned the word bacteria. And so this bacteria, we know that, we're supposed to brush our teeth a couple times a day, eliminate the plaque, the tartar. But let's talk about that bacteria. Why is it so detrimental to get bacteria in our mouth that's not being taken away, Lacey?
Oh, absolutely. So there are all of the different variables and the important factors in dental, like you said, about taking in nutrition for them to maintain their weight, enjoying food, quality of life, and all of those other things. But what starts to happen is that if that mouth isn't being cleaned adequately, they get this bacterial buildup in there, and it causes a chronic infection. So, it's called periodontal disease, which it starts as inflammation, gingivitis, and then the bacteria, the longer it's in there, it starts to become stronger and eat away at more of the tissue and the structure in the mouth. As that bacteria also gets older and more strong, then it becomes a lot more detrimental. That patient, every time they're swallowing, they're inhaling, there's the little micro inhalations, they're swallowing through their saliva. That bacteria goes through the entire system and circulates through the heart, the organs, all of these things. So it's more than even just the missing teeth and, issues even with them not being able to chew or pain or this or that. There's more this invisible systemic link. And it's very well documented. out there in the medical communities the link of gum disease in all of these systemic or body diseases. So it's directly linked to heart disease, heart attack, stroke, Alzheimer's, and the plaque buildup from that. And even in the carotid arteries where patients have had heart attacks and strokes, and they've put that that plaque in there and taken those microorganisms and seen that it's the same bacteria that's only found from the mouth that's now circulated through the body. So the plaque from your mouth builds up in your arteries and whatnot, like plaque from a cheeseburger. And, I've always tried to correlate that with folks so they understand that bacteria is doing so much more harm aside from just the obvious ways that we kind of traditionally think about our mouths. And you get a patient, say a diabetic, and if they're a diabetic, odds are they're going to have gum disease. And if I see someone that's been coming in and they've got some bad issues going on with their gums, then I ask them, hey, when's the last time you've been to the doctor? When have you had your, everything checked out? And kind of goes hand in hand. Uncontrolled diabetes, you're going to have gum disease most of the time. If you've got gum disease, you're not going to be able to control that diabetes. And a lot of other things, it's a chronic or a long-term infection. So imagine you're constantly exposed to this infection and it reduces your overall immune system. So that's very, very well documented. And that's why in the dental world, it's not just about even the restorative dental procedures, which are important. I mean, if you lose a tooth on a senior, and people may say, oh, we'll just take that tooth out. Well, you take a tooth out on any of us, and it's a domino effect. The teeth on either side start to collapse. The tooth above starts to grow down, always wanting to meet its mate. Then you get this sort of collapsing domino effect of compounding issues. So everything starts to shift. So you have to have restorative, and you have to have gum health, which is the foundation for a healthy mouth, and then all total health. You can't be running around with a chronic infection. And one way I try to kind of impress this upon healthcare providers is I say, hey, if your patient that you're caring for had a wound the size of a large palm, which still doesn't equal the surface area of the mucosa and the tongue and everything in the mouth, but if they had a wound this big, that would be a priority if it were infected. We wouldn't let that go on for years. So you have to kind of change that perspective because it's microscopic bacteria, viruses, fungus, yeast, all kinds of things that we find in the mouth. So I try to kind of put it into perspective in that way.
Well, you mentioned Alzheimer's disease, that it has been linked to bacteria, about dental bacteria. And as a matter of fact, there was an article I wanted to share, a piece in Science Advances magazine in January of 2019, just last year. And I'll read it, exactly how this was printed. There was a privately sponsored study confirmed that the bacteria that causes gum disease are present in the brains of people with Alzheimer's, not just in their mouths. This suggests microbial infections may play a role in Alzheimer's disease. So that was in the Science Advances magazine. And then it goes on to say there was another study in October of 2018 by a team at the University of Illinois, and they found that oral infections with that P. gingivalis, like the gingivitis bacteria that you were talking about, can cause amyloid buildup and neurodegeneration in the brains of mice. So they've done this in mice. They're ongoing studies because this was a big topic recently in the last couple years about, can oral bacteria go to our brains? Does it go in the, to our blood system, and can it affect? And so right now I think, it's not definitive, but they are certainly doing more research, and there's definitely a link. I did read something else that said that, they do see more of the amyloid buildup in the brains of people that have Alzheimer's that have poor oral health. but they weren't sure if the poor oral health caused that, which then in turn caused the Alzheimer's, or maybe there's a theory that says that the amyloid buildup is there to protect the brain from getting this bacteria, and consequently then the buildup affects the brain. So, they're really trying to sort this out, but there's definitely a link. So, it's something that we all need to be cognizant of, because it can affect us. It might be years before, they say, yes, this is definitely true, but they don't know what causes Alzheimer's. There might be more than one thing that causes Alzheimer's disease, but it certainly is something they've been looking at, and another reason for us all to brush and floss all the time, right?
Right. And why not take that preventative measure? If we know there's anything we can do to protect ourselves, especially from Alzheimer's and all the question marks that are still there, and how much it affects the communities that we work in, and just the rate of that out in the general public. I mean, anything that we can do to try to prevent and decrease our odds, I'm all for. On top of all of the other things we talked about with the heart health, and they're just, through the course of time, it's more and more and more studies of, all the correlations with this chronic infection. And, you think about the old adage about, and maybe this is my Midwestern, I grew up on a farm in another life. And, my parents, when we would they wanted to go purchase a horse, they would look in the mouth of the horse and see if that horse's mouth was not in good shape, then they wouldn't buy it. That's a reflection of its overall health, and they've been doing that for years and years.
Yeah, we see those movies where they're looking at that and saying, well, it's not good teeth, it's probably not a good horse, and there's something to be said for that. That is really a great analogy, Lacey. I love that. We have to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to hear more about oral health, what we need to do and how we need to do it, from the experts, Debbie Tarakovsky and Lacey Russell. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help, because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Communities. Arden Courts is a leader when it comes to memory care, because memory care is all they do. They have about 55 assisted living memory care throughout the United States, and they are a great resource, not just for taking care of the person that has memory problems, but taking care of the caregiver too. They offer lots of resources. Today they'd like to offer you this resource, the 36-Hour Day book. It's a wonderful book. It was written by Dr. Peter Rabins and Nancy Mace, and it's constantly being updated. Matter of fact, I think it's in its 5th edition. And this is a great resource for caregivers to learn more about caregiving, to learn more about not only Alzheimer's disease, but other related dementias, a lot of tips, a lot of definitions, and a lot of help. If you're a caregiver and you don't have this book, it's yours just for the asking. All you have to do is send an email telling them that you heard about the free offer on the Caregiver Solution Info Show. Put your name, your address, your telephone number, and asking for the free 36-hour day book. And they'll be happy to mail it to you. To email, just email to delray at arden-courts.com. That's DELRAY, delray at arden-courts.com. Send an email. They'll be happy to get this book to you right away, and you'll be really happy that you got this. It's a good read, whether you're looking up something specifically or you might want to just do it cover to cover. Either way, it works. So send them a note today and get reading, because it is such a good resource for caregivers. So my special guest today is it's exciting, because you might not think that oral health and dental care is exciting and how does that relate to caregiving, but oh, it does. And we're talking about that today. Lacey Russell's co-founder of Apple Mobile Dental Management. Debbie Tarkovsky is on. She is the president of Swallowing Diagnostics Incorporated. So ladies, I want to ask each of you, we're still in the midst of COVID-19, this pandemic that's still with us after 8 months or more. How has it affected your business? Because both of you work with the public, both of you, are important and essential to health. How has it affected your business? Debbie, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. As when you introduced me, I think you told everybody that we have been in business for 20 years in South Florida. And this is the first time something like this has ever happened that required us to shut down our business. We were closed for about a month and a half. During that time, we made a lot of adjustments to what we were doing so that we could get our service out there as quickly as possible to service the population. And of course, it's multifactorial. In the long-term care and assisted living care environments, they had to shut down as well to keep residents safe and keep visitors and vendors out. And at the same time, we took advantage of that time to revamp our vehicles and our protocols so that we have the highest level of disinfection going on in our trucks and between every patient that we service. And then Lacey and I took advantage of that time to actually work together to do some business development with Apple Mobile Dental together and partnered in that organization. And as well, we saw a need for access to COVID testing. I'm sure everybody remembers in the beginning that, just getting a test done, you didn't know where to go and how to get access to that. So we started brainstorming how we could help the community to have better access together, and we opened a division in Swallowing Diagnostics to assist with that and help provide testing out in facilities if facilities need the help. We have converted some mobile trucks so that we have mobile units that can go out into the community and help to fill that gap. That's about it, Lacey. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Lacey, I know that the pandemic has definitely affected the dental industry. Everybody was, couldn't go to get their, cleanings every 6 months. And even when the dentist offices started opening up, people were still afraid. But I finally ventured out in June and, got my cleaning. And I'm happy to say, look, Ma, no cavities. But it was a little, scary at first. But I have to say that my dentist office I've been going to for 20 years. They were very, very good about everything and wearing the mask and being extra cautious. So I know that it's affected you in that respect, not being able to be one-on-one with your patients right away. But there's also been something a term that's come up. I wanted you to talk about that too. A term that's come up that people are talking about now, and it's called mask mouth, right? So talk about mask mouth and what people are doing, and what exactly does it mean?
So for a lot of us, for healthcare providers, like Debbie said, we had to implement a lot of additional strategies, a lot of infection control protocol, which also involves extensive PPE. So when my staff goes in to see a resident, whether it's, well, at first we were not bedside, actually to rewind a little, initially in COVID, my company, typically we set up to accommodate however the patient prefers to be seen. So if that patient's bedridden or doesn't want to get out of bed that day, whatever it is, we accommodate, we see them bedside, or we have like a beauty shop or something like that. And we bring in our compressors and can turn any room into a virtual dental office. And so once the pandemic hit, especially in those early days, we weren't allowed to come into the facilities until everything kind of settled, unless it was an emergent situation naturally. And so that's also where Debbie and I found some collaboration. And with her fleet of vehicles, we outfitted them with UV filtration, HEPA filters. We have wheelchair lifts. So we were able to see, and are still, if something's happening where we can't come into the facilities, we can see those patients in a safe, controlled environment. With that said, when the staff goes in, they are donned head to toe with pretty extensive PPE. So, you see people out on the streets, we're all wearing our masks. And, my staff is wearing an N95 with a surgical mask over, with a shield, hair bonnet, gowns, booties. I mean, it's head to toe for the dental CDC guidelines. At first I immediately noticed it wearing so much PPE, but then I thought maybe that's just because I'm in the dental field. And then I started asking friends, and I kind of as a joke initially, I said, I'll bet there's a lot of people that are wishing they could go to the dentist right now because they're very conscious of their mouth and their breath and having this mask over their mouth. And so I think it is shining some light into what's going on in there. But the longer we've been wearing these masks, nine months or so now, you're having a lot of folks that aren't rehydrating and drinking throughout the day like they used to, especially healthcare providers, or just as we're naturally out there, we're trying not to fuss with these masks. And so we're not taking them off. We're not getting that influx of water, which is decreasing the saliva. And when you don't have saliva, whether it's based off of medications you're on or a mask or anything like that, if you don't have saliva to buffer acids, you're going to get a mouthful of cavities, or you're going to have some gum disease issues. Saliva is kind of the magic drug of the mouth. So a lot of people, and we were talking about it a little, they're really kind of gearing their marketing towards this dry mouth, mask mouth. It's a spin-off of what's going on with COVID. But at the end of the day, it's still, the bottom line, it's microbiome, it's the bacteria in the mouth. And so we have to be able to keep the mouth hydrated and keep the mouth clean. And there's a lot of people, like you said, that were very fearful of going to really anywhere, but also to the dentist during COVID. And so that's further compound. I'm a little worried. I'll see how it comes out in the general public when they all start coming back full force, and what kind of issues they're going to have with all of these compound factors.
Lacey, can you talk a little bit about mouth rinses and how that might be able to help with our patients as well as the general public?
Yes, the general public staff, I've been educating a lot in the facilities on this, because with the pre-rinses, it was sort of an optional deal. Back in the day, it was just for like a mouth rinse, kind of a mouth freshening rather. And customarily what you see in skilled nursing homes or some of these other care communities is that there's prescription chlorhexidine gluconate. It's a mouth rinse that's very common. And to me, that there's so many better options. That very tried and true product is only antibacterial. But what do we have going on with COVID? It's viral. We need something that's antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal. Patients that are having fungus and candida and yeast infections growing in their mouth from, dentures and all of these other things. But to the aerosols, the CDC has now made pre-rinses mandatory in our protocol. So now every time I see a patient, I'm giving them a pre-rinse. I have some little examples here. You may have some patients, they lose that swishing gargle spit ability. I'm not sure if you can see these little mouth sponges you've probably seen. So you can still take these and dip them in and clean the inside of the oral mucosa, clean all around. Take a toothbrush, clean the tongue is very, very important. And with the pre-rinses, as far as COVID is concerned, the more viral load that you have in your body, in your mouth, if you have these mass amounts of plaque that's containing that COVID virus, if you have it, the more viral load you have is related to the severity of COVID case that patients can have in the longevity. So, again, kind of shining the spotlight of the importance of keeping that out. And if you're using either as a staff member, a patient, the general public, your mouth is dry, you're needing to keep things very clean right now. But using that pre-rinse is going to decrease aerosols. So, we all hear about these droplets and you cough, you sneeze, and, things could, spread the contagion. If you're using a pre-rinse, that really helps to cut back. I think it's something like 30 seconds of a pre-rinse, an adequate pre-rinse, which I can talk about, actually decreases the viral load and by 95%. Not saying we can control what's going on in the lungs and things like that, but when this is the main cause of these aerosolized microscopic, sort of suspended microbes in the air, that the pre-rinses are extremely important. And when you're in a community like that, if you can be giving that, applying that for the patients and keeping their mouths clean, you're going to decrease the potential to spread COVID in the community.
So, Lacey, I have a question. You're talking about pre-rinse. Is that different than, like, say, people that do a swish with Listerine? Are they two different kinds of things? And that being said, is Listerine or some similar scope or whatever? I don't, want to have just one company that I'm partial to. But how does that fit in? And is that really going to help us because of the alcohol or the non-alcohol and the other things that are in these mouth washes? So is there a difference between Listerine and a pre-rinse? And how would something like a Listerine or a scope help the general public?
I personally, I don't use any of those that have alcohol and all of the dyes and things like that. When you're talking about, and even the CDC's recommendation is hydrogen peroxide based products. So one thing I do want to tell, I had this conversation with my grandmother in independent living, and she's nervous with COVID, and I was telling her some things to do, and she said, I was rinsing with the hydrogen peroxide. I knew you were going to tell me that. But she's taking it full strength out of, the old brown bottle we've all got under our sinks. And that's 3% hydrogen peroxide. So the CDC also recommends 1% hydrogen peroxide. So you actually need to dilute that 1 part hydrogen peroxide to 3 parts water. And that will be very effective, any of the rinses that have hydrogen peroxide. So when it comes to Listerine or anything like that, if it's a whitening mouth rinse, then typically those have hydrogen peroxide in them. The rest of them, personally, I just don't find them to be. I think that there's a lot better options. There's one that's gotten very popular since COVID that they've really pushed in their marketing, and it's called Peroxyl. And that is a mouth rinse with, proper hydrogen peroxide in there. Again, I don't think the chlorhexidine gluconate is really the best that we could be offering for our patients. Debbie and I are actually working with a lab to manufacture a mouth rinse for us that is chlorine dioxide, activated chlorine dioxide, which is antibacterial, microbial, antiviral, antifungal. And in getting these larger bottles, institution-sized bottles or smaller bottles. If that's something that that anybody's interested in, of course, they can always reach out And I think it's important for all of us, for our own health, for anything, for people that we're caring for, to reduce the aerosols and keep the mouth clean for all of these reasons that we're talking about: systemic health, COVID. And one other point on COVID is that there's a lot of false positives that have come up from old viral loads in these people's mouths, which I found to be fascinating, because they had this old, plaque buildup. And then once they cleaned all of that out, there was a patient that had tested positive over and over and over again, got the mouth debrided and cleaned up, and tested positive the very next day. Or I'm sorry, tested negative the very next day after removing that old viral load from the mouth.
So you just answered, a popular question: why are there so many false positives when people keep doing false and they don't know, why? Again, the answer is inside, right? The answer is in the mouth. And you would have really thought about that. So thank you for answering that question. You both of you are just so passionate and so wonderful with the work that you do, and I know that people are going to want to find out more about what you do. So Debbie, I want you to tell people how they can find out more about Swallowing Diagnostics, Inc. and what you do, and maybe how to contact you.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, we have a website. Our website is swallowingdiagnostics.com. So anybody can go to the website to get some general information there, or email me directly. My email is Deborah, D-E-B-R-A, Deborah at S like Sam, D-I-N-O-W, S-D-I now.com. And I'm more than happy to schedule time to talk to you, answer any questions, either over the phone or by email. I'd be happy to do that. So.
Wonderful. And what about you, Lacey? How could people find out more about Apple Mobile Dental Management?
You can reach out to me. My email is my first and last name that's on the screen. So Lacey Russell at applemobiledental.com. Also, you can go to our website, applemobiledental.com. You can reach out to me. Debbie and I, we work closely together, so you could reach out through either one of us. But I'd be happy to talk about the program that we have put together. We do have different ways that it's also paid for if the patient's eligible, so it's no cost to the families or to the facilities. That way we keep, we can come in on site, try to do some of these procedures without sending patients to the ER in a time where it's a pretty risky place to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. We want to always try to avoid that ER. Well, unfortunately, we only have a couple minutes left. It's gone by so fast. But I wanted to get in a couple tips here. We're talking about keeping our oral health healthy, and we want to acknowledge that it's not easy for caregivers, whether they're in a community like a long-term care community, or caregivers in a memory care, or caregivers at home with their person that maybe has memory problems. Not easy to get them to brush their teeth. Do you have any tips, a couple tips that you could give to help that situation?
I do, and I wanted to share this reference. This isn't something I can take credit for, but I love not reinventing the wheel, and it was really great information. And it's called Mouth Care Without a Battle. Hopefully you can see that. It's something that you could Google, and it has handouts for care providers on how you can deal with some of the different things that you come across. Like the resident may refuse, be combative, or may not open their mouth, and different techniques. And this is, this is what my staff has always done. I just, this is how we just worked and acclimated to the type of clientele that we work with, our patient base. And but it's nice to see it all in writing, so that's a good reference point.
Thank you. So just Google, what did you say it was called? You Googled Mouth Care Without a Battle?
Mouth Care Without a Battle.
Okay, very good. So everybody Google that, get the tips, and learn how to help your person take better care of their health when it comes to our gums, our teeth, and all of our oral cavities. thank you guys for being here today. I love talking to you.
Yes.
And thank you all for joining us on Caregiver Solutions. So thank you. Stay healthy.
You too. Take care, everyone.
Talk to you, Marcia.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others.